I can go on and on and on. But the bottom line is that I have the experience and I've done the push-ups in my life to be at this point in my life to be giving you guys some good advice on how to survive this SARS-CoV endemic infection now.
Fantastic. So let me just ask you a couple of questions here to kind of lead into where we're going. I've one of the things that we've seen amongst a number of people is I'll go real basic here is masks. There's a lot of debate on whether or not you should wear one, whether or not they are helpful, if they cause more problems medically, So can you go into that and sort of break down some of the misinformation that's out there about something as simple as wearing a mask?
Well, I mean, absolutely. But before I get to that answer to that question and give you the answer to it, I think people need to put this virus in the context. And this virus is one of the most mutagenic, pathogenic, largest RNA virus on the planet. This virus, it came from an animal, it came from a bat, and now we're finding out that this virus is having more mutations in an animal called a mink, M-I-N-K. In fact, in Amsterdam today, they killed 15 million minks animals because they use them for harvesting for their fur, and 12 people end up dying because the SARS-CoV virus jumped from this mink into these individuals, and the virus is changing. So folks, the bottom line is this is an RNA virus and it's very lethal, very infectious and stuff. Before I start talking about the question to wearing masks, I think everybody needs to kind of understand if you're going to be able to survive this, what I call now not a pandemic, but a global endemic infection, is that this virus is here to stay. This virus is in the population. This virus is going to be here this month. The virus is going to be here for the next 50 years. This virus does not recognize seasons. It's going to be here in the wintertime, the fall, spring, summer, etc. And in the next 2 years, folks, this virus is going to be very, very lethal. I mean, 250,000 more Americans are going to die before December 31st. Another 250,000 by March. And then we're going to recycle back around one more time, very strong over the next 2 years. So we're looking at possibly daylight probably in 2022. And that's the bottom line. And if you think that this is some type of conspiracy theory, you're absolutely wrong, because I don't have time to deal with conspiracy theories. I don't believe in hoax. I don't believe in, Disneyland or Mickey Mouse. I deal with science and I deal with medicine. I tell everybody, if you understand the medicine, you understand the science. That's just the bottom line. So I want everybody out there to take a piece of paper, because this is very important. This is going to save your life, your family members, your community. And in my world of infectious diseases, the reason why I've dealt with everything from Ebola to multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, I've dealt with clinics in the jungles of the Amazon, dealing with malaria, dengue outbreaks. One way that we protected ourselves, and we call these biosafety, biosecurity protocols. Within these biosafety and biosecurity protocols, you have to understand the fundamentals of how diseases are transmitted, i.e. viruses and bacteria. Well, we have in our profession, in my area of expertise, when I teach my students, when they train with me in infectious diseases in the jungles of Peru, we teach you guys there are 7 F's and there's 1 R. Let's start with the R. This virus is respiratory, folks. This virus can be transmitted in the air. It can stay in the air for 14 minutes. This virus does not recognize socially distancing from 3 feet to 6 feet. This virus can go 52 feet. This virus can go a mile. You can imagine if this virus gets into an air conditioner unit, it can affect the entire whole building. And this is what's happening with the nursing homes and the assisted daily living places where people are confined in a building and people are using the same air system, so people have been affected that way. Well, let's talk about the 7 F's. And I want everybody to write the 7 F's down. You have what we call face, you have feces, you have flies, you have fingers, you have formite, you have foot, and what we call the bottom of the shoes, you have food, and you have fingers. That should be all 7 of them. I think I'm pretty good at that. But if I'm missing one, we'll come back to it. Let me repeat them again. We have face, we have feces, we have flies, we have fingers, we have formite, we have face, and we have the bottom of your foot. that should be 7. So folks, in our world, if you understand these F's and the R, you're going to be able to survive. So you just asked a question about respiratory, about a mask. Well, folks, one of the frontline defense in defeating this virus, or potentially you protecting yourself from being affected, you better be wearing a mask. And why I say a mask? The mask is a frontline protection for you in an airborne disease, a viral disease like this. Plus, the mask is going to also help you from contracting the influenza, because people are going to have not just the SARS-CoV virus, people are having influenza. You can have both diseases at the same time. So this mask is a barrier for you, absolutely 150%. It protects you from the environment. It protects yourself from the environment. It also protects you from other people. For example, I just flew from Atlanta last night back to Las Vegas. I've been flying for the last 6 months all over the world. And when I'm on that airplane, there is no social distancing on the airplane. You're not going to be able to get a mile away from people. So when people breathe, and when they say, okay, guys, you can take your mask off to drink your water and the little snacks they hand out to you. So you can imagine everybody drops their mask down, you're automatically infected, period, on an airplane. And so this is why it's important that that mask is the frontline protection. It should be like the mask could be like you putting on your shoes every day. It becomes your norm. It is the new norm. We're not going to be what was 7 months ago or a year ago. This is your new norm. And so that mask is part of your wardrobe. It's going to protect your life. If you're in public, i.e. at Walmart or a dollar store or whatever the case is, and you're around concentrated people, you better have that mask on or you're going to get infected. And you get infected, it's going to be a whole different ball game. That's just the reality to it. Doesn't matter if it's a mask, it's an N95, it's a mask, it's a surgical mask, or if it's a cloth mask, or my big time respiratory mask that I wear on the plane sometimes. The bottom line, as long as you have a barrier in this day and age, in the environment for respiration, you're going to be fine.
Okay. So when we talk about the mask per se, right? There are variations of different masks out there. Mm-hmm. So is there a specific type that you recommend over others? And what is the duration of, a mask? Let's say if it's the surgical mask, can you wear those over and over again, or should you get rid of them?
On a surgical mask, you should probably get rid of that. That's what we use that. I'm a surgeon. I use surgical masks all the time. And so when I get done with it, you get it away. That's what it's supposed to be. You're not going to be walking around with a surgical mask in an environment all the time, because that mask itself is going to be infected with the virus on the outside. So you can be just like an N95 mask, et cetera. These masks need to be discarded when you're out in public and stuff. I don't take my N95 in my tuberculosis ward, wear that N95 mask, and I take it home with me. No, we get rid of that mask. If you have a cloth, very important for you to be interchanging that or washing that cloth mask every day, because you have viral particles on the outside. You can have influenza on the outside because you breathe in. If you walk into that space, there might be viral load in the air. It gets onto your mask, the cloth mask. So you need to make sure you wash that. So in my opinion, it doesn't matter what mask is as long as you're changing that mask off every day and making sure you understand that the mask is a barrier for yourself.
Okay. All right. So we talk about changing, right? So what about individuals that, they have to go outside, need to come back in the house? Is there anything that you see that the general public absolutely needs to do in terms of their clothing? For example, grandma may have the little children come over, and they may come in the house and they've been outside playing, and they go jump on the bed and roll around on grandma's bed and, this type of thing. Is there anything that you would advise grandma to do when the grandkids come over? And I'll take that a step further because we got the holidays coming up. So there's going to be a whole lot of people who want to go and visit and move around. And you talked a little bit about moving, through the airport. Tell us what your thoughts are on those situations.
Well, this is a perfect question, because then we're going to go back into the 7 F's. We're going to talk about face. We're going to talk about feces. We're going to talk about flies and fingers, and we're going to talk about food. We're going to talk about formite, and we're going to also talk about the face itself. And what I'm talking about, understanding these F's and stuff. So you're absolutely right. What is a formite? A formite is an inanimate object. It is your clothes. It is the bottom of your shoe. So when you have people coming to your house, folks, nowadays, that you need to make sure when you're coming from that environment, from work, whatever place, like we do in the medical profession, you make sure you take your clothes off at the front of the door because the virus can be in your clothes. People talking about, well, I'm gonna cough, and I'm gonna cough into my sleeve, and I got the SARS-CoV virus. Well, that virus will accumulate in my sleeves, on my clothes, and so people make that mistake. So a formite is your clothes. A formite is this water. A formite can be a coffee cup. The first case that happened in Germany came off a salt shaker. A formite could be your ATM card, your money. This virus, folks, on formites, i.e. your cell phone, this virus can live 28 days. That's a fact on your cell phone. The virus, when you look at compare it to influenza, the virus lives, influenza virus lives for 14 days. Big distinction. When we look at feces, the virus lives in feces for 35 days. So protect yourself at that front door before you let anybody in your house. You make sure you have biosafety protocols for yourself, i.e., making sure that people don't wear your shoes in your house. But if they do, you better have one of the mats that we've developed as technology that has a solution called Proguardium, a hypochlorous acid, which disinfects people bottom of their shoes, because we call that foot, but people don't realize that viruses can travel on the bottom of your shoes, influenza, E. coli, etc. So you can imagine somebody's asymptomatic or they're symptomatic, they go to a bathroom, public bathroom, could even be your house. They flush that toilet with that feces becomes aerosolized. It could be on your door, floor, your windows, in your air conditioning unit. Then people walk out with their shoes, be it into your house, to a school, to a public place, a facility. They're tracking that virus under the bottom of their shoes, which is their foot. And so that's one of the things that we developed, and we thought about how do we make that type of protective bubble. So one of the frontline things is that when you have kids coming over, they want to go jump on Big Mama's bed and all that stuff. You better get some of what we call our Proguardium, which is in our hypochlorous acid solution, that you can put in our little mini bio decontamination unit that you can spray yourself. We have 600 kids in North Carolina have a little mini bios, and that they get on the bus, they spray their seats down, they spray themselves down, they spray their books, they spray their pens and stuff. So this is one way people can have a good Thanksgiving, have good, cornbread stuffing, cranberry sauce, potato salad, talking about ham, sweet potato pie. I mean, I'm getting hungry just talking about it. But this way you can protect yourself is making sure that you implement and understand the basic transmission of diseases, i.e., man, I got to make sure I have a mat in front of my house. If I got people coming over to disinfect the bottom of their shoes, or they better be taking their shoes off. And I better have these little mini bio decontamination where I can spray people's, their whole entire self from the head down to the bottom of their pants using the decontamination unit with the Proguardium in it.
Yeah, just got this one
Yes.
today, right? This is the larger one here. So I'm
Yes.
playing around with this one now, making sure everything is where it needs to be. So definitely.
Well,
And this gives me I understand the science behind killing the virus and everything, but just to have a peace of mind, because once you begin to understand that, okay, there's there's something out here that you can't see, number one, and you don't know where it is, but that it could possibly be on everything, everywhere you touch. Those areas that I tend to touch frequently, I use this and I keep them safe. So.
Absolutely. And I think what I want to make sure that your folks understand is that, when we vetted the technology and we came up with the hypochlorous solution Proguardium for SRS, we use this in special forces, guys. We use this to decontaminate equipment that have been in Ebola zones. it kills Ebola. This hypochlorous acid solution, Proguardium, actually kills the SARS-CoV virus. It kills influenza A and B. It kills hepatitis. It kills MRSA, gram-positive, gram-negative bacteria, E. coli, salmonella. And the most important thing, folks, is a green toxic compound. It's toxic. You know, when I say toxic, you look at chlorine, that is toxic. You look at Lysol, that is toxic and stuff. You know, this Proguardium solution is non-toxic, green product, EPA listed, enlisted for use in the SARS-CoV pandemic, which is now endemic, to kill the virus, and it's non-toxic. You can spray this in your eyes, your mouth. People use it we use it, you're using it every day if you're using eye drops. You're using it if you in some organic farms they use that. People use it to in our wound care for surgery. We use it in neonatal units to disinfect neonatal units because there's no toxicity to it. I did a program about 3 weeks ago with Ickey Woods, the famous football player with the Ickey Woods Shuffle Cincinnati Bengals. His son, 16 years old, died from asthma. You know, and so we were talking about asthma and the SARS-CoV virus and its relationship. And so what I tell people, for a lot of Black folks, a lot of Black people have asthma. So what's a trigger? What sets you off to having an asthmatic attack at your house? Guess what we call one of the organic vapor compounds, OVCs, is chlorine, bleach, Lysol. These are toxic compounds that you need to get out of your house, because if you continue using chlorine over time, or bleach, you're going to get lung cancer. And so we came up with the green toxic compound called Proguardium hypochlorous acid solution, which kills everything and is non-toxic.
Yeah. So it's interesting you mentioned that. I had a conversation with a teacher just earlier today, and they talked about the fact that they had been asthmatic and this sort of thing. And some of the stuff that was being used in the schools was starting to give them more, issues, or reactivate some of the things that they had been experiencing before. So have you seen that is something that, is happening? Just for the sake of people who have children, and they need to be aware of, what their children are going to be experiencing with this back to school push and that sort of thing.
Well, part of our SRS as a frontline company in the world, we have opened up schools. We have opened up Thomasville, Lexington in North Carolina, Jackson, Mississippi, and I've walked through biodecontamination with children holding my hands into the school, and they're being sprayed with the Proguardium. What the problem that you're having is that, and so for example, in Lexington, North Carolina, we went to the school system. They invited us out there. They want us to put and implement biosafety, biosecurity protocols. The first question I asked was, show me what you guys are using now. They bring out this chemical stuff out of this nice bottle, and right on the bottle it says, this is hazard. Do not use around children. So you can imagine all these years, these folks have been using chemicals, and they're using chemicals around children. Well, guess what, folks? Now you have Proguardium, which is a non-toxic, non-allergy, non-chemical. It's a solution, and it doesn't have any of these effects. That's what your children and my grandchildren should be using, what they should be using in the schools, or using them on themselves.
Okay, good. So you mentioned something earlier about pandemic and endemic. Can you go into what the difference is between that and how you get from one phase to the next, and why we should be aware of what phase we're actually in right now?
Well, the bottom line, and initially this was what we call a pandemic infection. It originated from China, and then it spread to the world, and it went from every country in the world, every continent in the world. And when a disease goes out of its normal territory, it affects multiple countries like this one has. This is what you call pandemic. Now what's happening, folks, disease is not pandemic anymore. We call it global pandemic. It's global endemic. What does that mean? When we say endemic, that means a virus is in the population. It's in your community. It's in my community. It's in your state. It's in a country approved, Germany, etc. And this virus is going to be here for a very, very long time. Now, how do we decide what phases are? What phase we're in? like I was saying back in March, that we're going to go through 3 phases. We're going to go through a first wave or phase. We're going to go to a second phase or wave, and we're going to go through a third. Well, we're in the second wave now. How do we know we're in the second wave? What happens is you get a mass amount of people are infected the first time. It doesn't matter what disease it is. Then you have a decrease in cases and people start feeling comfortable. Then all of a sudden you have an increase in cases, dramatic increase. And now we're having dramatic increases. For example, today in the United States, we had 100,000 cases. You can imagine what's happening in Europe. They're shutting down Europe. Again, they're shutting down Italy, France. The world's going to shut down again, folks. And our job is to make sure that doesn't happen. And the third wave will be a little baby bump. I say about 25% of the population. And this is going to occur probably like in March. And then we're going to go back around one more time, a first wave, a second wave, and third wave. That puts us into the end of 2022, maybe 2023. But the virus is now endemic. We're in the second wave, and you have to really protect yourself now because we're in October, November, December, January. It's going to be the second wave, but we also have flu, influenza A and B. So you need to very using great global security for yourselves worldwide. And we need to make sure you have personal endemic security protocols for yourself.
Okay. So on that note, I want to talk a little bit about testing, okay, because that's another huge topic. There's some apprehension about taking the test, whether or not the tests are accurate. There was a whole lot of controversy about, if the test results were fabricated, because there was, just all this different information going out, right? So what is your take on, number one, testing in general? And then why do you think that there was so much, controversy around the accuracy of the test? So many false, reports and this sort of thing.
Well, when you look at testing and when you start talking about antigen antibody testing, it's most probably in this particular virus, the RNA virus is unreliable. Why? Because the virus has so many different strains out there. This virus, since last year, it's had over 12,000 mutations. It's had over 7,000 mutations in the most important gene, which allows that virus to attach to your eyes, your nose, your cells in your tongue, your lungs, your kidneys, your gastrointestinal tract, coronary arteries, your brain cells in your brain, even in your testicles. This virus is mutagenic. So when you start relying on antigen antibody testing, it's unreliable because all it does, it tells you possibly if you have immunity, i.e. that you were infected. It doesn't tell you if you're actively infected. So in my opinion, this is the biggest problem why the virus has really gone global worldwide, because China flooded the market with testing and improved unreliable. The CDC put out testing here in the state of Nevada. They were refusing to use the test because it was inaccurate. The most important test that everybody needs to have for this, and it's what we call PCR, preliminary chain reaction, which what that is, folks, it measures the RNA of the virus. It's 100% sensitive and 100% sensibility. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. PCR, but PCR is very expensive. And so this is the game changer in controlling this disease, because if you come back with PCR and you're positive, you're positive. There's no ifs, ands, and buts. The antigen antibody test gives you lots of false positive, false negatives. It's inconsistent. So PCR is the test that I recommend. So when we start talking about how do people survive, one thing at SRS is that what we did was, once again, we vetted the technology. We have the ability to come to your house, the ability to come to schools, airports, buses, you name it. And we can test your facility, your home, and let you know within 90 minutes, real time, if that virus is in that establishment, your home. And then we can mitigate and control and contain that virus if it's there and stuff. And so this is a thing where we're talking about technology. Also at SRS, we have the ability not just to test the facility, we can test the air, we can test the water, we can test the sewage. And when we start talking about testing, we're not just testing the sewage for the virus itself, because that's how we measure how a community, health of a community, i.e. when I was in Pakistan, we had the polio outbreak and stuff. We measured the sewage, and as the sewage viral load disappeared for polio, after we treated everybody, then we knew the population was healthy. So we can test the building, we can test the water, we can test the air, and now SRS came out last week. We were FDA approved. Now we have a laboratory, 2 laboratories and 2 mobile laboratories that we can test individuals. And we test individuals by PCR. And our test is the most reliable 100% on the planet because it's based off of PCR technology.
Okay. So I heard one of your conversations before relative to testing, and for just regular people who just go about their day, go about their daily business, they go down to a testing facility, get a test, and the test says that they're negative, right? So many people may feel like, okay, I'm negative, I can just jump back out here and do whatever it is I'm doing. I heard you speak about knowing the specific day of infection and how you should, conduct yourself regarding which day you actually get tested and that sort of thing. Can you just elaborate, a bit more on that?
What I meant by that is that, when you start talking about an individual that's infected, yeah, you can go get tested right now and you might come back negative, but you can walk out that door and breathe in the air or contract that virus on your hand. You touch your face, because most people touch their face 100 times a day, and you can be infected within 12 hours of the infection. But for antigen antibody tests to really work, we have to catch people on day 14 of the infection. Really, it's really day 8 of the infection when you're getting the maximum amount of viruses being replicated in your body. So usually by the day 8 to 14 in that range, you want to be testing for people for the actual virus. But that's very difficult because you have some people out there that are symptomatic, you have some people out there that are asymptomatic, and then you have false negatives where you might get tested. Well, guess what? You might be in a subclinical part of that infection, or you might be one of these individuals that do not have an immune response to it, and you're asymptomatic. And so, but the best test for PCR test, where we can test you and for a fact if you have the virus in your body, yes or no.
Okay, that's excellent. So now, what another this kind of leads into that piece, and this is not something that I want to experience, but I have 2 friends that have actually tested positive for COVID-19. They went into the hospital. They had to stay there, and they were in a situation where they didn't know if they were going to live or die. And one of the experiences was that I was told was that they could hear the doctor and the nurse discussing what they needed to do, what the next steps were. He was saying that his condition had deteriorated over 3 days, and the doctor was basically saying, well, we got to move on. Let's move on because he's not going to make it. And the nurse was saying, no, we need to use the equipment that we have. We need to give him more oxygen so he can live. Let's try this. What advice would you give to families, right, who may not be have any medical knowledge or anything like that? They end up going to the hospital, and of course, you can't just go in and see a person, right, because they block that. What can a person do to ensure that their loved ones are not being medically mismanaged in the hospital?
I think that it's very important that individuals have somebody that they know, a friend, a family member that is a doctor. The same situation you had. I've been consulting on a 19-year-old kid in Utah who went in the hospital for positive for the SARS virus and also the COVID-19 disease. Started to deteriorate. The family out of Chicago couldn't really have access to him, and they called me up, and I ended up talking to doctor. Different. I was making recommendations, what you need to do, what's your background, etc. So that's a very important point. And that's what a lot of minorities do not have, is access to having a family member that can actually talk to the doctor on that same level. Because if they know that there's a family member that's a doctor, they're going to have a different attitude. I'm just sorry. That's just the way it is, because I know just as much as they know. In fact, I probably taught them. And so your friend
Right.
is absolutely right. And this is part of the healthcare disparities, where you know that if a certain doctor takes care of black babies, you have 3 times more likely that baby's going to die. And so you understand that if they're treating you, you can imagine that if you're an adult, older, they're not going to really go all out to make sure that you get the best possible care. And you just said what your friend heard him say. They were trying to rationalize care. The doctor was, and he was lucky that the nurse was an advocate for him, or he'd have been checked out of here. And that's just the reality. But this is part of the healthcare disparity, is getting to the system, getting tested, and being treated very aggressively on the front end, and not being, giving substandard care.
Okay. Yeah. So I kind of want to get back into, since we're approaching this holiday situation, right? We talked about the grandchildren coming over, jumping
Right.
on grandmama's bed, and we know what we need to do for that now. What about people who have animals? Because people love their pets. Some people have pets that are in their house. They have a little space for them to sleep and stay. Other people, like to have pets in their beds, or the pet might be a small dog and run all over the place. What and you mentioned that the virus is on the bottom of the feet. So people go out and walk dogs all the time. What should they do in terms of keeping their pets safe, and also keeping themselves safe?
Well, I think one of the things that I think folks need to understand is that the virus is this is an animal virus. This virus lives in the animals and it jumps into human beings. For example, the bat, it jumped in. You saw what's happening now in the world with the mink. This little furry little animal, mammal, is making a genetic mutation of the virus, and that virus is jumping into human beings. If you have a pet and you take that pet outside and you bring that pet home, you better have a mat, that SRS has, that is impregnated with the Proguardium to disinfect that pet's feet. Bottom line, because the virus can be transmitted on the bottom of the feet. So you can imagine your dog comes in your house, and a lot of you folks, I see you guys on the Disney Channel. Y'all get Buffy in the bed. You kiss Buffy on the tongue. Buffy's lifting
Right.
everywhere. He's up on your sofa, or that dog can transmit that virus to you, and you can't get
Yeah.
infected. I told you earlier that this virus can live on a formite. A formite is an inanimate object, and this
Mhm.
virus can live for 28 days on your sofa. It can live 28 days on your floor. It can live in your bathroom up to 35 days. And so very important that when children and your pets are coming over, that you make sure that they're being sprayed down with the Proguardium solution that is non-toxic, because you don't want to be taking Clorox or bleach or Lysol and disinfecting your pet's feet or your children.
Okay. So on that note, you talked about, I want to talk about strains of the coronavirus here. We noticed that in certain areas, for example, I'm in Florida, right? So we've been dealing with, this since the onset, but initially we saw it in Washington, and then New York just exploded. And then it's here in Florida. We know that there's a lot of traveling between Florida and New York constantly,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, right.
So do you think that that uh, you know that travel between those two places has anything to do with why they were such hotbeds at, pretty much through the whole pandemic here? Or
Oh,
is it, how do the different strains play into any of that?
oh, absolutely, 100%. You're accurate about that. The New Yorkers brought that stuff down to Florida, and Florida brought it up to New York, and people from Italy and Spain brought it to New York. And on the West Coast, the Chinese brought it to Toronto, and the Chinese people got on trains from Toronto, Canada. From Vancouver, Washington and Vancouver, Canada, and they spread it all down the West Coast. There are multiple strains of this virus out there, folks. There are L strains, L strains. I mean, it's up to, probably now 60 different mutations. I mean, concrete mutations, 12,000 that have happened in this virus. This virus is changing. The West Coast strain of the SARS-CoV virus is different than the strain on the East Coast strain. The strain that's in South America is different than the strain here in the United States. The Chinese strain is completely different than what's happening in England or Ireland or Scotland. So there are multiple different strains. That's why, folks, when we start talking about the possibility of having vaccination or treatment, it's very difficult. That's why you have a lot of false positives and negative, because maybe that individual company made their test based off the West Coast strain. And then somebody on the East Coast from Florida gets it, and they get the test from the on the West Coast platform of assay. You come out with a false negative because it can't read the strain that's going around in Florida. So that's very important in understanding that the strain is the multiple strains that are there is a game changer. It's also part of the evolutionary genius of the virus itself, because as long as it's mutating, it has a chance to survive.
Okay. So we know that there are different strains, right? And we know that we've seen numerous accounts of companies that are, what is this thing called? They say Project Full Speed or something. I don't remember the name, Warp Speed or something like that.
Operation Warp Speed.
Yeah, Operation Warp Speed. So, and at the end of that is the V word, vaccines. Okay. So do you think, number one, in terms of what your experience has been, are we gonna, as people, gonna have a vaccine that's gonna be able to combat this whole situation by the end of the year? Maybe March, maybe in next spring, April, May. What's your take on that?
Well, I'm not going to take this. I'm not going to take the vaccine. So that tells you everything you need to know, because I know the vaccine is not going to be effective because there's too many multiple strains out there. And then you worry about the complication from the vaccine. That's why they're having a very difficult time coming up with a vaccine that's effective, because you come up and you start injecting people with vaccines, you can go blind, you can die, you can get paralyzed from it. That's what happened in the 1950s when they came up with Operation Warp Speed for polio, and they came up with this vaccine and they injected everybody in the country. 20,000 kids ended up dying. A vast majority got put on iron and water. So when you start talking about dealing with RNA viruses that mutate all the time, to come up with vaccines for HIV, for dengue, from chikungunya, Zika. These are all RNA viruses. Very difficult, and the effectivity, nobody knows. I do know that this is that the people they have injected with so far, there is no conferred immunity. What does that mean? You get injected, well, your immunity goes away in 3 months. You might even not even have an immune response, and that is the drawback to when you're dealing with RNA viruses, in particular this coronavirus, SARS virus. There is no immunity, no long-term immunity. Even if you do get infected, you can be reinfected again, and you can be reinfected a third time. So that's why it's very important to protect yourself at all times.
Right. So yeah, let's talk about the reinfection part, because there were some folks who felt that, yeah, okay, I want to get the coronavirus now because then I'll be immune, when it gets really bad in the fall. Well, the fall's here, and how does that impact a person in terms of them being affected? Or is there a probability of them being weaker, when the next time they get impacted, or will it in fact make them stronger or allow them to fight the virus better than they were able to before?
Not necessarily. I mean, folks, I want everybody to understand, you can get infected the first time and get infected a second time, you get infected a third time. You might get infected 6 or 7 times. I mean, that's just the reality when you're dealing with coronaviruses, in particular the SARS-CoV virus, is that there's multiple chances you can be infected. And just because you get the viral infection the first time and you recover does not give you immunity for the rest of your life. you can be reinfected. So that's very important to make sure you understand biosafety, biosecurity protocols, because all the biosafety and biosecurity protocols is designed to make sure that you are not exposed, and if you are exposed, to make sure the viral load is so low that you don't have to worry about a massive infection.
Okay. All right. So it looks like I want to be cognizant of time here. We said we were going to do this for about an hour, so it's about 7:17. So I want to open up for any questions that anyone may have here. If there's any questions in the chat room, let's see if we have anything. If anyone has any questions that's on the call, you can go ahead and ask away if you like here. So we can see.
Hi, just want to say, this is not a question, just to say that I appreciate hearing what the doctor has to say, and I can sum it up in one word. That's scary.
Well, my job is not to scare people. I know I speak to 100,000 people every week. I mean, I was on the MSNBC, 2 weeks ago, et cetera. My job as part of the COVID Healthcare Task Force for the Black Congressional Caucus is to make sure that our people understand the significance of what's going to happen, because we're the ones that are going to take in the blunt of the fatalities, the blunt of the morbidities, the complication. Our kids are not going to school. So my responsibility is to give our people the best information so you can make a good decision for yourself. And so we can try to get this economy and get everybody back into work and getting kids back to school. Because, for example, in the Mississippi, there are 3 that have to depend on the school system for their lunch and their breakfast. So it's very important for us to get people back to school. But people need to understand that this is a different environment. The virus is, you can't see it, but it's there. It's always there. And so you have to protect yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Okay.
Hi.
How you doing, Dr. Moore?
Okay. I just want to say thank you to you guys for doing this. I'm in my 7th month of COVID-19, and I just appreciate every opportunity that I get to hear somebody that believes us, because I was gaslit from March until June. It took me till June to find a doctor that believed me. So now it's just a lot. And again, I just wanted to jump on and just thank you guys for believing us, because COVID-19 changed my life.
Well, let me tell you, ma'am, it's what a lot of people don't realize. And I've had the opportunity to do disability forms for folks and stuff in the country, is that it's not about the acute effects, it's the after effect. What you're going through now, the depression, the lack of the oxygen. You might even have what we call mental fog, gastrointestinal problems. So this changed a lot of people's lives on the initial front, but people don't realize this is a long-term process. You're going to have occupational therapy, physical therapy. You're going to have mental rehabilitation, because the virus is here to stay, and the virus make it is the complication of what we call the post complications of after surviving. And I understand you completely, 150%.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, Dr. Rowland, let's kind of talk about that a little bit, because there's another topic that many of us have heard, and it is this. I've been seeing interviews of people who've experienced being impacted with the COVID-19 disease, and this is long haulers. What type of, outside of what you just mentioned, is there going to be a time when you think, a person would be able to fully recover, whether it's a year, or 2 years, 3 years down the road after being impacted?
One thing I learned in my career as an infectious disease specialist and a trauma surgeon, I never put a time frame on anything, because everybody's different. Right. There are going to be some people going to get the virus and they're going to recover. There are going to be some people that get the virus and they're going to go through what your friend just went through, have some serious major complication. Might be 6 months, it might be a year, it might be 5 years. As a long haul trucker, I think it's very important if you have that type of connection. These are the people that need to be having the biodecontamination unit to spray their cabs down. Everywhere they go, they need to be spraying the pumps down, et cetera, because they can carry that virus or pick up that virus anywhere in the country. And so it's very important for them to have their own personal protection devices for themselves. Even having mats made for the trucks themselves, or they can spray the bottom of their shoes using the biodecontamination spray unit that you have.
Right. Okay. Great. Fantastic. Let's check here. Do we have any other questions? Let's see. Is COVID-19 SARS a gram negative or gram positive virus?
It's not a gram negative. It's either one of them. It's a virus. Gram negative and gram positive are bacteria. We have gram negative bacteria positive. We have gram positive bacteria, gram negative bacteria. But viruses are not are gram stained. The virus is either DNA or an RNA, and this is an RNA virus.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Looks like Dr. Morigi wanted to say something else here. Okay.
Well, I'm going to just I want to make sure that everybody understands the 7 F's like we've talked about. People need to understand the virus can be transmitted on your face. It can be transmitted in feces. It can be transmitted by flies. It can be transmitted by food. It can be transmitted by formite. It can be transmitted by your fingers, which is your hand. And most important, that the virus can be transmitted on your foot or the bottom of your shoes and through respiratory. So people need to understand it. They need to teach their kids that. They need to understand that these are the multiple ways that the virus can be transmitted, both viruses and bacteria. If you understand these protocols, these different transmission routes, you can inhibit or prevent yourself from being infected.
All right, so one last question here for me, because we are getting close to the end here. Back to the holiday, since that's something that's right around the corner for a lot of people. There are individuals that sometimes feel like, well, I know them, they're my good friends. We usually have a big Thanksgiving dinner with them every year, big Christmas dinner, whatever the case is. I've been monitoring the news lately, and I've heard a few people say, well, you need to stay in quarantine for a certain amount of time before you go to someone else's home and these sorts of things. So tell us why, that is the case, or why that is not the case, and what should we actually be aware of, if we should even go. Personally, I'm going to be at home. I won't be visiting anybody, maybe like this, but tell me what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I want all all the listeners to make sure they get the Denver Spectrum, the Denver Urban Spectrum. The Denver Urban Spectrum out of Denver. You can get it online. It's a black magazine that's had everybody from Obama to Quincy Jones and Deanna Warwick and me, Dr. Rowland, on the front cover of that. Well, every month I have a question and answer part. So people send questions from all over the country. And one of the questions was, what can people do for the holidays? Well, if Big Mama's coming over or the old uncle coming to your house, you better ask the question, have you been tested for the COVID-19 or SARS-CoV virus? Have you had a fever? What are your symptoms and stuff? The same questions they ask you, you need to ask them. And have you been around somebody that's been exposed to the virus, et cetera? If they answer all these questions, no, I feel safely and confident that they can come to your house if you're making sure that they're sprayed, their clothes, their hands are washed with the best antiseptic hand wash, their shoes are disinfected. Man, they can come over there and have some turkey and cornbread stuffing and sweet potato pie, eggnog. I have no problem with that. But if you're talking about, if you don't ask these questions, you're right. Some of the closest people to you might be the most infectious person on the planet.
Okay, so that brings me to another question relative to the HEPA filters. I saw a couple folks from the airlines. They said that they did the study, right? And they said that because the virus comes outward, and when you're on the plane, it goes directly to the ground, and then they have the HEPA filter on the plane. So it would be, mainly the safest environment to be in. And I saw that come out right around this time, around holiday time. So can you talk about, if there are certain, equipment that you can have in the home, and then how is that whole HEPA theory or study? I don't know which one you want to call it, but how does that sit with what your knowledge base is?
I mean, HEPA filters is appropriate for trying to do a good job in sterilizing the air. But the bottom line, folks, is that, that's respiration. We talked about the other 7 F's. So somebody to the bathroom on an airplane and use that toilet and flush that toilet, and you got viruses everywhere in the bathroom. They come out of the bathroom. It's on the bottom of their shoes. That virus is not going to get sucked up, off the floor if it's in feces. It's not going to happen.
Right.
So this is common sense type of stuff. If I have one technology that I would recommend for air filtration that everybody, and I've been talking about this for 6 months, that you should have in your home or your business, is a unit called a Molecule, MOKEUCLE. That is the air filtration that I recommend based off of technology, because this is the only one that I've seen that actually kills the viruses and also bacteria in the air. So people can Google molecule.com and they should get these. They got these little individual units and stuff. And you make sure that you put in there Dr. Rolling, all capitalized, as your code. And they're supposed to give everybody a great discount. But Molecule air filtration unit is what I recommend for everybody, especially now with the influenza and the SARS-CoV virus in the air. You put these units in your room. You put them in your. You want to have people over your house. You put one of the units in your dining room. That thing will suck all the air out. All the air will go through this thing, and it will keep your air sterilized from having any viruses in the air or bacteria. 100% guaranteed by Dr. Rowland.
Great, fantastic. So we got another question here, and it's how do you properly utilize the disinfecting mats in the solution?
Well, the way you utilize is that you take a mat, you have an entranceway. You can put them, we have them in front of schools. We have them on school buses. We have them in county facilities. So you take the mat, you put it at your front door, and anybody comes in your house, with that, and the Proguarium has a reservoir where the Proguarium is put inside. So when people step on that mat, the Proguarium automatically goes on the bottom of the shoes, and they have a dry area. Then you walk it dry, because it's really a dry mist. And then you're disinfected on the bottom of your shoes, and not unless you just want to make sure everybody is not wearing shoes in your house. That's another way you can take care of that problem. But for me, the most important thing is the entranceway into your house. You control the environment, you control the virus.
So where should you place that filter? If you have filters, should it go in your bedroom, or should you get 2, or should it be at the front door?
No, it's not a filter. It's an air filtration unit. I'm talking about.
Okay.
You have to have minis that can be in your room. They have that can be in your room. They have individual big units that can be in your dining room, that can do your whole dining room, your living room. You just have to put space that you need and get the appropriate unit for yourself and stuff. But to me, this is game-changing technology. I'm gonna be doing several programs tomorrow and this weekend, and et cetera, et cetera. So when people ask me, Dr. Rowland, what do we need for air filtration? My number one is molecule.com. That is the unit that you have to survive the next couple of years through this pandemic, endemic infection now.
Okay. Well, that's fantastic. Looks like we got most of the questions answered, and I know we're right at 7:31 here. So I don't want to prolong the time any longer. What I will do here is, if you have any further questions, You can, if you go into the chat, you can just email the information over, and we'll get some of the stuff answered for you. Dr. Rowland, is there anything else you want to let people know about to close it out here?
No, I just think everybody is most important thing is that you have to have confidence in the information you get from individuals. And the most important thing, you got to get your information from people that are experienced in the field. I.e., I'm not a high school teacher. I don't teach accounting. I'm not I'm not an engineer, but I definitely do know infectious diseases and viruses and surgery. And my experiences and my information is based off my experience in my life, and it's based off of realism. And my job is to save people's lives and prevent people from having horror stories like your friend, the one that's just is still recovering from the start of COVID-19 infection and stuff. So I hope we'll do this again. This is part one. Let's
Absolutely.
try to do maybe the December 15th, right before Christmas, and we'll have a better appreciation of where the numbers are going, so we can protect all your individuals. And please share this with all your constituents and stuff. And I look forward to coming back again.
Well, definitely, we want to thank you for allowing us to sit and talk with you here. It was a very informative hour we spent, I think, and I hope everyone else feels the same way. Again, if you have any questions, or if you want to provide contact information, this has been recorded, so we're gonna send this out to people so they could have a look at it on their own. And that's all I got here, and we'll be back December 15th. Around that time, if anything changes, we'll let you know, right?
We're gonna call it a cup of eggnog with Dr. Rowland.
That's right. So everybody bring your eggnog, and if you want to put something in it, hey, I don't want to know. You can do whatever you want to do, but we'll be back.
I hope this was enjoyable, informative. I hope it was clear and concise, and I love sharing the information, but it's very important for folks to take this very seriously because we have a long ways to go.
Definitely.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. Take care, everybody.
Take care, guys. Be good.
All right. Bye-bye.
Mhm.